Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar about challenges and opportunities for entrepreneurs in the time of COVID-19. My name is Tamar Katamadze. I'm a senior associate at Fridman Law Firm, and I will be moderating the webinar. I would like to ask our firm's managing partner and talented guest speaker to introduce themselves, please.
Sure. So I'll kick it off. Thanks everyone for joining, and thanks to the panelists. This is our firm's second webinar. The first one went off great and we got some amazing feedback from that. And now it's something we would like to continue on doing. And thank you, Tamar, for moderating this and assembling a fantastic team of panelists.
Of course, thanks.
Just a quick intro, Fridman Law Firm, and we just celebrated our 1-year anniversary on August 1st and have had the opportunity to work with some amazing and talented entrepreneurs and founders. We're a full service corporate firm based in New York City. And I wanna kick this off to the panelists because I know that a lot of people have been watching webinars and may have a little bit of fatigue on that end. So Jonathan, do you want to introduce yourself, and then we'll go to Eyal and then Nick?
Sure. Really excited to be here. My name's John Kestenbaum. I'm the co-founder and managing director of Talent Labs. I'm actually a lawyer by education, entrepreneur by trade. I've been an entrepreneur in the talent acquisition technology space for most of my career. Built and sold a few companies in the space, and I'm actually now investing in talent acquisition technology. For the most part, just talent acquisition technology, but I do dabble outside. But been an investor and an operator, and like I said, really excited to be here to share some of the things that I've learned and some of the things that I'm seeing as an investor.
Cool, thanks, Jonathan. It's great to connect with you and get to know you and the rest of the panelists. And Neil and Tamar, thanks for inviting me, for today's webinar. I'm Eyal Bino. I'm a co-founder and partner at ICONYC Labs, which is a go-to-market partner and investor for Israeli startups coming out of Israel or Israeli related, meaning one of the founders is already based in New York. We give them a small check and space, but really the majority of the help is in building the company in the US, getting access to first US customers, partners, obviously the funding aspect of building the company, etc. So far, we have about 50 investments in 5 years. That went on to raise about 200 million from some of the top VCs in New York and Israel. Been in this ecosystem for about 10 to 12 years now. Grew up in Israel, moved here when I was 20 years ago, and here I am. Excited to be here.
Thanks, Nick. Please.
Awesome. Hey guys, my name is Nick Cuomo. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Allstar Gaming. We are a B2C tech startup based in New York, focused on the gaming space. Our mission is to make the everyday gamer the star of their greatest gaming moments. I spent the last 10 years or so of my career in marketing and technology. I come from a weird background. I actually went to school for graphic design, and before that I was a pro gamer. And yeah, we're an early stage startup. I'm really excited to be working with such an incredible law firm, and Neil's been just an amazing partner to us. And yeah, good to meet you guys.
Thank you everyone. I appreciate the introduction. It's great to be speaking with all of you today. And just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the panel discussion, please type them into the question box in your Zoom control panel, and we will have time for your questions at the end. So after finishing the webinar, a recorded version will be available online on our firm's webpage. And then I would like to give you a brief overview of the topic before move on to the questions. Overall, entrepreneurs and startups play a key role in the country's economy in terms of job creation, innovation, and long-term growth. The COVID-19 crisis for some entrepreneurs and startups has presented obstacles to their creation, challenging their survival and limiting their growth. During the crisis, business registrations have been dropping significantly in recent months, and the missing generation of new companies has significant implications for economic outcomes, notably employment. So to tackle these challenges, countries have developed programs to provide short-term liquidity and availability of funding. However, since countries start reopening, it is time to think about the long-term plans for businesses that reduce barriers to entrepreneurship, provide some incentives for startups, and boost entrepreneurial opportunities. Some entrepreneurs and startups have benefited from the fallout of the COVID-19 pandemic by shoring up available high-quality talent and experiencing a boost from work from home and healthcare trends, for example. And some countries have already introduced measures more specifically focused on startups. For instance, France has set up a 4 billion fund to support startup liquidity, including bringing startup funding rounds. Germany also has announced a tailored startup aid program expanding and facilitating venture capital financing. And the UK has announced a co-financing fund for innovative companies facing financial difficulties. According to the McKinsey research, it could take more than 5 years for the most affected sectors to get back to 2019 level contributions to GDP. So I would like to ask our guest speakers to give some lights regarding the issues and answer our questions. Generally, what policies have the US implemented for small and medium-sized businesses? Has the country already developed long-term plans for entrepreneurs to encourage them to create new businesses? So do you think the initiatives have been effective, and does more need to be done? Nick, what do you think? Or
Yeah, sure. I'll jump in. I mean, I think all the programs that you mentioned abroad sound amazing. I haven't heard of anything kind of similar to that in the US. You know, it's been my experience as kind of a first-time founder and having kind of been at this for a year. There really isn't a ton of support for startups in the US, and I think it's just been my experience that, especially with kind of, you know, COVID and the impact it's had on the economy, it's really never been like riskier, I think, to be a founder. And I think it's really tough. I think that the US is kind of going through a really challenging time where I don't feel like there's a lot of incentives to, you know, innovate as an independent entrepreneur. I think, you know, in a world where, you know, you have to pay for your own health care and, you know, income is so important and the safety nets just aren't really there. It's really difficult to kind of just get out there on your own and take the risks and the sacrifices it really takes to be a successful founder. But on the flip side, I think it spurred a lot of really interesting conversations around things like universal basic income, which I personally think could open up a ton of innovation in the United States, especially because once you've got that kind of foundation of safety and you don't have to think about some of those kind of riskier aspects of going off on your own, I think it really opens up the opportunity to start a business for the first time.
thank you. Jonathan, could you add anything?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think, you know, thank God for the Paycheck Protection Program. That saved, you know, I'd say probably millions of businesses from going out of business. We would be in a very different place had they not implemented the PPP loan. I mean, I could tell you just some of the companies that I've invested in have relied on that capital to stay alive. And, you know, it's hard to, you know, for the most part, you know, companies stop spending money and it's hard to keep your business going when you don't have cash coming in. So, no, I think that was a really good positive step that the government made to keep the economy moving. I think the verdict's still very much out on how long this, you know, pandemic is going to last. You know, I'm I always look to plan for the worst case and hope for the best case. So, I'm planning that we have at least another year of this. And, in that regard, I do think that the government's going to have to help in some way beyond the PPP loan. I don't have great ideas necessarily myself on what that should look like. But I think looking at some of the leaders that you had mentioned, France in particular, I think Ireland also has done some unique work in helping do their Enterprise Ireland program, helping the startups locally scale. I think, there's a lot that we can learn from other countries.
Okay, thank you. Next question I have about a crisis like the one we are currently experiencing requires quick thinking in the face of uncertainty. So what are the primary challenges entrepreneurs are facing since the country started reopening, or are they prepared for the road ahead?
So I'll take this one. So I think, listen, it's an interesting time, right? I think that going back to Jonathan's answer about the PPP, some of my companies use it as almost like a bridge loan, right? Like they got like a few $100,000 from the government, kept them going, right? And I think that speaks about being innovative and about trying to find any way to survive, right? Because you want to thrive and you want to create opportunities for growth. But at a time like this, companies are looking to raise capital the first, let's say, probably couple months. Most VCs completely, I don't want to say shut down, but they focused on making sure their portfolio is doing okay and replanning, right, for 2020 and 2021, looking at hiring and looking at, cutting some employees, et cetera. So I think one of the issues that founders need to be looking at is how can they adjust to the new reality. We actually did have a webinar a couple months ago, and one of the panelists was the CEO of Sisense, which is kind of a $1 billion New York-based company. And he basically said, if companies are doing the same thing they've done 6 months ago and 3 months ago, they're not doing it right. They have to innovate. They have to look at things differently. Everyone is now working from home, right? So who knows when we're going to go back to the space and work together as a team. Now maybe you can hire talent in, places like, Oklahoma or Middle America or Israel or Ireland or Europe, where talent might be similar, but is less expensive. And, now it becomes how everyone is becoming still on the same page, right? How do we get to a point where everyone is talking the same language? How is that, everyone is still committed to the success of a company, even without being together in the same room. So I think a lot of it is about adjustment and about how quickly you make it.
Okay, thank you. What do you think, Nick?
Yeah, I'll add that I think it just varies a lot depending on the industry. I mean, I think, Allstar is very lucky we're in gaming. I think you have more people playing games than ever before. Lots of people that have never played games are picking up games for the first time. So there's a lot of, attention on our industry. Growth is going well. But, if you're in hospitality, or if you're in, travel, they're hit hard. And I think to Eyal's point, there's just a lot of, I think, behaviors and kind of norms that, as a business owner or a founder, you just can't count on anymore. So I think it just makes planning more difficult. I think execution risk is higher. And I think, the companies that really adapt and kind of look ahead and plan for that next year or 2 years out and kind of see what is the trend of the future, I think are really the ones that are going to come on top.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'll just add to that. I still see investors cutting checks. I just think that depending on the industry, seed capital is going to be hard to come by because, seed capital needs to get you to a point where, in some cases you have your first client, and some, depending on, where you are, what product, some cases you have first cash coming in, and that time is going to take longer. So I think seed stage venture capitalists are a little, worried about the market, but there's lots of opportunity to invest in distressed deals, get good valuations on companies that are in need of money. So there's still capital being deployed. Just depends on the industry.
Yes, as you mentioned, although the number of new business registrations generally drops during recession, many successful innovative startups or businesses have emerged from periods of crisis. For example, Dropbox, Uber, Airbnb, WhatsApp, Groupon, and Pinterest, which were all founded during or just after the global financial crisis, and also Alibaba's Taobao that was founded during the SARS outbreak in China in 2003. So this confirms that periods of crisis are not only a challenge, but also provide new opportunities for entrepreneurs. My question is that if entrepreneurs will take advantage of the situation and turn these challenges into opportunities.
Okay, I'll start.
Okay, sorry.
You might have to just direct us because we don't know.
Sorry, yes.
Especially I am on my phone, so I'm not sure, who else is talking. But I think, like in every crisis, some companies are going to innovate in it's just nature of the beast, right? Like we saw it in history. 10 years ago, it was Uber and, Airbnb, and others. I think that there's some areas where you're going to see immediate growth of companies. For example, in telehealth, there's a company in New York that just announced, I think, a $200 million round doing on-demand pharmacy, right? So you want to get your prescription, you get it in within an hour or two. Anything in productivity where companies can help. Startups can help companies become more productive and more connected with each other. I think that's an area where there's going to be a lot of growth. But I think in general, there's enough opportunities out there, and there's still money to get deployed. I agree with Jonathan. I mean, good companies get funded. I mean, that's typically the way it is. And I think companies that struggle, that's harder. And I do expect in the next couple of years, a couple of new companies to emerge that we probably haven't heard of, but they are going to take off pretty quickly, especially hopefully when the economy goes back to normal.
Jonathan, would you like to add?
This is the most exciting time for someone like me in my shoes. I mean, change brings significant opportunity. I mean, this is like, I'm super energized by all the opportunity around me. Eyal mentioned some of the industries that, where there's going to be significant pockets of innovation. I mean, I think, it is the best time to start a business in a recession, not necessarily, despite the challenges that come up, especially in a time like now where sales will be slow. It's just, some of the big players that had maybe a monopoly go out of business. Some fundamentals of people's businesses change overnight. You no longer have, just to give you a stupid example, you no longer, if no one's going into restaurants, you no longer need a physical location. So let's start virtual ghost kitchens and do delivery only restaurants. I mean, that's that kind of scenario you're going to see in many industries. And so all these companies that had massive market share in certain verticals that are stuck with the overhead of real estate are going to be in big trouble. I mean, I'm not suggesting that no one's going to go to restaurants ever again, but it's such an exciting time for an entrepreneur.
Nick, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with everything that's been said. I would just add that, like Eyal's point earlier around like telehealth, I mean, I think you're just seeing a lot of trends that were already out there just accelerating dramatically. I mean, you have some of the largest companies on the planet that were like, we need everyone in offices. We're not going to innovate. We can't do remote. This job has to be in person. All of a sudden, overnight, everyone's 100% remote, and they figured out how to do it. So I think you're just going to see a lot of these trends that maybe, the economy and large corporations were reluctant to embrace. They have no choice now. And so I think you're seeing a lot of interesting innovation in industries where there historically hasn't been. And on the flip side, I think it's going to create a whole ton of new opportunities, new industries that no one anticipated. And I think it's very exciting to be an entrepreneur, because the next 5-10 years, they're going to look back and this is that pivotal moment where the paradigm shifted and big change happened.
Okay. Do you have any like long-term or short-term plans in terms of crisis, how you can handle with this?
I mean, I think for our business, generally speaking, you just need to be very thoughtful about how you spend money. We're an early stage startup. We're very fortunate to be backed by Mark Cuban at the end of last year. We've got over a year of runway in the bank, but we had a business plan that had kind of increasing investments over time as we would lead to other kind of funding rounds, and we basically had to not throw that out, but essentially put that on pause and say, all right, how do we kind of keep things stable and steady? How do we accomplish as many goals as we have, while adjusting for variables like uncertainty in the fundraising markets, uncertainty in how quickly certain trends might affect our business and vice versa. So it's really just it's forced us to take a very hard look at how we spend capital and how we plan that.
Thank you. Eyal, would you like to add anything?
No, I agree. I mean, it's this period is all about adjustment, right? Like there's an opportunity to innovate and become more scrappy, but you really have to adjust how you go to market. And you should have kind of at least, if before that you would raise, let's say, a seed round for like 12 to 18 months until you go to your A round. Now it's really 18 to 24 months or even 24 to 30 months, right? So, one of our companies, here's a good example. They raised a $3 million seed round end of last year. They really felt like they got some really good momentum, and they immediately went and decided they want to raise their A round pretty quickly. And they were successful of raising a $10 million A round in the beginning of kind of Q2, middle of Q2. So now they have runway for probably like 2.5, 3 years. And now they really have options, right? Do we want to spend more because we want to get more traction, or we want to stretch it and maybe even get some venture lending, right? So it's all about having options as a founder, and it's easier said than done. I mean, Nick is the only founder here of a startup, so kudos to you. And I know it's easier to say it from my, perspective and John's perspective, right? When we invest and help accelerate, but I think it's a lot about planning. It's a lot about looking at the reality and constantly changing with it.
Yeah, I'll just add that I think, you can't have one plan anymore. I think that was probably, one really good plan is fine, but you have to plan for every contingency right now. And exactly.
Yeah, and I would add, it's time, as far as I'm concerned, like batten up the hatches, like make sure that you're leveraging contract labor where you can, don't hire full-time labor for something you don't need to, eliminate as much risk as you can. If you don't need a physical location, I'll tell you, we had 3,500 square feet in Manhattan. My lease is up in August. I'm out. We're not renewing our lease. And look, we're going to get an office again. There's no question that we're going to have to. I mean, it's not scalable for some of my, our employees to work from home based on their, personal situations with kids or whatever around the house. Probably hear my son screaming in the background. But I think that there are opportunities, that will exist to maybe open smaller offices in different cities, and like I said, leverage contract labor in ways that you might not have thought to leverage it before.
Thank you. And do founders and employees of startups, many of whom have had space in a shared office like WeWork, as you said, and want to return to the office? So what do you think? Do founders find it easy to work remotely with their team? And what are the drawbacks of remote work you are experiencing?
I could start with that one.
Yes, please.
I was the biggest hater of remote work. I fought. I lost prospective employees because of it. I had existing employees that were not happy because we didn't offer it. My sticking point was, how do you build a culture virtually? I felt like it was going to be harder to manage the team virtually. The world made it so we had to live in a virtual environment. And I could tell you that we leverage technology, we leverage Slack, we leverage Monday, we leverage Zoom, combination of task management, communication, both video and text, which has solved the need for me feeling like I'm micromanaging. We've built some, thoughtful structure into our calendars, which allow, frankly, we probably should have done it when we were in person. Like it makes us operate more efficiently. So that fear went away. I'm still a little nervous about the company culture piece. I mean, there's only so many virtual happy hours you can run on Zoom, so I still think there's an opportunity for some entrepreneur to come in and do something cool there. And I'm sure there are, and I just don't know about it. So I'd love to know about it, just because we could leverage it with our team. And then, in terms of, I actually think we're operating more efficiently remote. And so that anxiety has gone away as far as I'm concerned. So I think this is a huge opportunity. Eyal had kind of mentioned to leverage talent overseas, potentially leverage some price arbitrage in parts of the world where you can access, cheaper talent. So, definitely an interesting, new development.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll add from our perspective, we're kind of lucky. We were remote for probably the first 6 months of the business, and just out of necessity and by the nature of two co-founders starting a venture, right, starting to bring in some contractors, friends helping us out, but no real need or budget or cash for an office. And then we had an office for all of like 2.5 months, and then the pandemic hit. So we already kind of we didn't really even fully convert into the in-person kind of working style. I think I have a soft spot for it. I feel like we want to come back. You want to get in person. I think to Jonathan's point, building culture across Zoom, across Slack, it's hard to do. There's not a whole lot you can do. Culture is like an interpersonal thing. You kind of need people's chemistry to all be in the same place,
Yeah.
and for that to kind of create something new. So I think we'll obviously go back to an office when we can, but I think until then, we've seen some really unintended benefits. No one has to commute anymore. So, you've got extra time at the start of the day and the end of the day, which is important if you've got, kids and family and things like that. I think we're kind of we're global by nature. Gaming's global, and, we weren't super concerned that, you needed to be next to us. It was like, are you the right person? And so, that, in a remote world, it's sort of more natural to kind of, work with people digitally in that respect anyway. So, we miss our office. These posters are from the office. I didn't get them specially made for my home, but they need to go somewhere. So
Thank you. Eyal, would you like to add anything?
No, so I have a different challenge because 2/3 of my companies are based in Israel, right? So they cannot come to New York. They can't have meetings. We moved our program completely virtual, right? So on one hand, it's great because now it's not just like an investor who comes into the office. We can have Zoom, office hours with VCs from New York, California, Tel Aviv, etc. And the crazy thing is, like, a bunch of our companies got funded during COVID-19 without even meeting investors. It was through Zoom. It was by great VCs like Insight and IA Ventures and TLV and some others, which shows you that when there's a good company, they get funded and then they can build something really special. But I agree that at some point you're going to have to go back to something that has some sort of a personal touch, right? Like, it's hard to have a drink over Zoom. I mean, when you have a drink over Zoom, you have suddenly your son or your daughter in the background starting to cry when you have a 2-year-old, and that drink really is not feeling good. So suddenly, right? So yeah.
Yes, everyone meets in person life, I think.
Yeah, and but I think there's something so much more productive about being remote, right? So I think the new reality will have some sort of a combination of maybe like 2 to 3 days at the office, and maybe 2 to 3 days remote, which I think is it's pretty cool because you can be productive on and off office, and I think that's really interesting.
Wonderful, thank you. So while borders are closed and closure will continue until the end of this year, how does it affect an entrepreneur's day-to-day life? How does it affect an entrepreneur's access to capital? Eyal, I would address this question to you.
Yeah, well, listen, it's hard to raise capital in a normal world. So now it becomes so much harder, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, there's no way around it. I think the good thing is we passed through the first like 2 months where everyone were just panicking and didn't know what to do, and there was so much uncertainty, right? Like I remember when I got an email from, we live in New Rochelle, so we're like ground zero of COVID-19, right? So we got an email that our school is closing for 2 weeks, and I said to myself, "Are you crazy? 2 weeks?" And we're like 5 months into it. So
if only you knew.
So I think the day-to-day, I think it's a lot about productivity, right? It's a lot about funnels. It's a lot about getting intros, whether it's for customers, partners, or VCs or investors in general, through warm contacts. I think at the end of the day, there's such a layer of social proof and the ability to connect to someone that someone else knows, and there's a mutual, I think, understanding. Hey, this is a contact that I know. You can trust me. I'm going to make the intro. It goes a long way, instead of just going on LinkedIn and trying to hit 1,000 people and then 100 answer, and then maybe you have phone calls with 10. That's very tough, right? So now you look at the network effect in your network, and suddenly it comes into play because it really kind of shortens the time to market to customers, partners, to investors, to talent, etc.
Thank you. Nick, what's your experience?
It's made things much more complicated. We've got a team that is spread across the globe, and I think, as again, going back into planning, trying to figure out, where we're going to be and where our team is going to be in the next, 12 months, 24 months. It's almost impossible to make long-term plans around people potentially relocating, or how we're going to even just get together. We're lucky in Q1 we're able to fly in a lot of our international team and get some of that kind of in-person team building and build that culture and really get to know each other before the kind of lockdown happened. But now we're going on really 2 quarters where it's just not possible. We can't fly people in. We can't have that week or 2 to really get together and
Sure.
really focus as like a proximity to one another. So it's just made that a little more challenging. And it's kind of just, I guess we've had to double down on, it is how it is right now. And that's how it's going to be until we have reason to believe otherwise.
Thanks. Jonathan?
I would agree with, Eyal. It's hard to raise capital. This is probably going to make things a bit harder, but for the most part, the deals that I'm investing in have always come through my network. If I'm funding a company at a conference, it's probably too big for me already, because it's unlikely that, especially in my small world of HR tech, that would be something that I would be interested in. And so I would look at a different lens here, which is the sales side. And I think that's going to be another really challenging thing for startups is many of the companies we've invested in have gotten lots of their sales leads from conferences, and those not being in existence. I mean, deals happen over a drink, right? At these conferences, that's where you hear the whispers about this company's looking for this tool, or that's where you build the relationships with the folks inside the companies because you have a good night out with them or something like that. And so that piece missing is going to make sales a bit more difficult because it's hard to really build that rapport with somebody online.
How is the situation on the market now? Is the current situation a chance for the companies left standing to consolidate their power and acquire market share? Or do you think we will see a pick up in M&A activity, for example, for tech companies? Jonathan?
So we're definitely seeing an increase in M&A. I'm in a talent acquisition in general is a space where we've seen significant consolidation. There's been a number of point solutions that have been built, and private equity has come in recently to roll these assets into, just larger companies. It's accelerated due to the pandemic because there's just distressed opportunities, and companies that maybe wouldn't have been for sale a year ago are interested in being for sale now because they are nervous about what the next year could look like for them, and they want to take advantage of their position in the market. So definitely seeing more consolidation. I think it depends on the industry, though, where you'll see that happening.
Yeah, I agree. I think, where I see activity is either at the kind of beginning stages, right? So there's a seed company, maybe they, they make like 50K MR, right? Like they make 50K in revenue per month. They don't have a ton of runway. Do we want to sell the company, maybe do a kind of an acqui-hire and merge with another company or player in the space? Or kind of at the end of the road, right? Like the DoorDashes of the world and the Seamless of the world, where they see an opportunity to become bigger and bigger and consolidate, an entire industry. So I think what's going to be interesting is to see what everyone in the middle is going to do, right? Like the companies that are like, the A round to like the C round, where they're going to end up in a couple of years. I think that's where I think the market will determine a lot of the outcome, for these companies and for their, founders, investors, etc.
Nick?
Yeah, I would agree with both you guys. I think it just makes sense. I think nowadays the current economy, the uncertainty, it just makes efficiency more important than ever before. So it makes sense to have like companies that, are maybe not so confident in their long-term outlook, to find those efficiencies to increase their chances of kind of survival and really consolidate. It depends on the industry. But, I think generally speaking, this is a huge opportunity for any startup if you're simply just able to stick it out. I think this is an endurance game right now. I think that, you have people saying it's a year, it's 2 years, it's 4 years. Nobody knows. No one has any idea. Any dates are just totally fabrications. And so the reality is, the scrappiest and most lean companies that maybe have a better strategy but are later to market, or, maybe they've got a better team but less capital. The reality is if they can endure, I think you'll see a great kind of leveling out of the playing field and a lot of opportunities that maybe, that weren't there before, right? Open market share that, was gobbled up and that company just couldn't sustain, and now someone new can kind of come in and take that over. So I think there's a lot of opportunity out there right now.
Thank you. And what do you think, what are the markets that that you think will be prevail?
Gaming.
Jonathan?
I mean, I'll just add specifically, I think the social aspect. I think humans are social creatures. And I think one of the common things we've all talked about, like missing, is going out to drinks with people, seeing people at the office, like literally just any social activity at all. And the reality is a lot of us gamers, we've already kind of hacked this, right? And we had Discord and multiplayer games, and 80% of gamers, the reason why they play games is to socialize. So I think you'll see gaming not just as an entertainment medium, which is what it's predominantly been, as the largest form of entertainment, but I think you're also going to see it take market share from social media, and it's already done that. Social media has remained largely flat through the pandemic, whereas gaming activity and usage of gaming has spiked. And I think you'll see gaming as a social service begin to kind of become a bigger and bigger trend into the future.
Thanks. Eyal?
So yeah, I think a lot of industries are going to change, right? So health, for sure, right? It's been such an uphill battle for health companies. I mean, to get into hospitals and to get into clinics, etc. But now you're starting to see companies really scale. There's a ton of innovation. There's a ton of capital going into health. So I think that's one where, we're pretty excited about. We have a bunch of companies in that space. Jonathan mentioned dark kitchen. So I think food tech is completely changing, right? Like you go to Fairway today, you see, type of meat you never even thought exists before, right? So we have a company in the dark kitchen space called Milko that just closed like $5 million seed round, and it was very quick. It was like 30 days. They're doing so great, and they just started selling in like January or February, right? So it just kind of tells you something about the excitement of VCs. I still think that there's an opportunity in productivity, right? So we saw obviously Zoom becomes an amazing player. But I feel like even in video conferencing and virtual events, right? Like all those companies that used to like optimize conferences, now suddenly they have to go into virtual events and conferencing and kind of getting a better experience for users. And another one is education technology, right? Like schools have to go virtual now. They really have to go,
Yes. I know.
some level of education for their kids, right? So, that's, I think, an area where there's going to be innovation, but also I think there's going to be a lot of companies, right? So it's really going to depend on traction and the ability to differentiate yourself from other companies. But in general, I think, a bunch of industries are just changing, right in front of our eyes.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Yeah, I mean, Eyal mentioned most of the industries that I think, will bring interesting innovation. I think within different segments of different industries, you're also going to see some innovation happen. So just to give you an example, in law, to let's say you had to do an arraignment, you'd have to go in person, sit in court for hours on end. You get to bill your client for 7 hours while you're sitting in the court waiting for your turn to come up. Sometimes you're commuting, there's commuting time. For a while, the courts were letting you do those virtually, right? Like that kind of stuff is going to change the game. I mean, first of all, the amount of savings that clients are going to get from not having to pay their lawyer to sit there for 5 hours, both sides, you could do this in 15 minutes, like over the video. That's awesome. I mean, I can tell you, so I think things once, kind of like me with remote work, once I did it, I felt more comfortable with it. The courts are going to feel more comfortable with it. There's going to be technology involved. I think there's lots of room for technology. I mean, as a consumer separately, I mean, telehealth to me is awesome. I can't tell you how many times I had a cough or something. I wanted to go to the doctor and I had to like restructure my whole day. Now I could go on my phone and have a video. I mean, it's awesome. So these things I think will stick for sure.
Thank you for your answers. I think we are running out of time. Let me check if we have questions. No questions, but so it looks like we covered all of our questions. And is there anything else you would like to cover before I wrap up? Jonathan or Nick?
I would just echo, I think it's a really exciting time to be an entrepreneur, investor, service provider in the space. I mean, I know that, the pandemic has created lots of uncertainty, but to me, change brings opportunity to innovate and differentiate. And, this is the time that the diamonds in the rough get to shine. So, definitely an exciting time.
Thank you.
I just want to say that I want to use Jonathan's virtual background for the next webinar. So
it's very, very relaxing, very spacious.
Yeah, chilly. Okay. Okay, thank you everyone for joining us today, and we appreciate you being here, and thanks again, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for having us.
So much, guys.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate you having us.